there, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations, and we are going to be working on a thrift find. I thrifted this guy. I can't even get them all into one shot. I thrifted him. Now, he is a rough, almost sandpaper texture, but he has chips and discoloration. I mean, if I wanted to, I could probably just get away with maybe painting black and things, but I want him to be funky. He's a little plain. So we're gonna have some fun with him. We're gonna do some paint washes. We're gonna do some paint dripping. We're gonna go colorful. But to start, we're gonna start with unifying the color. Now I'm gonna be using, for this one, I'm gonna be using my DIY clay-based paint because it is water-based. It does not have a sealer, so we've got lots of play time. We're gonna be able to hit it with water and make it run and do all kinds of fun things with it. We can play with some waxes. So that's what we're gonna do. But to start, I just wanna unify it by painting this guy all one color. I don't need it to be solid, so I don't need to make sure that the black is all covered. That's okay because we're gonna be doing tons of layers. But I am just gonna get one coat of DIY's Mint Chip, which is a pale green. Now, why am I starting with this? Because I got a lot of it. Some of them I've only got some small cans and they're partial cans, so I have a almost full can of that. That's the logic behind it. Sometimes you're just going, I don't want to open a whole big can just to get this guy painted. I'm going with a big can I've already got open. You know me, I'm gonna be real. That's it, that's why I started with this color selection. So I'm going to use a chip brush for this because this is a rough texture and I want to at least try and get it down into all of those little grooves and into all the different texture. You can see that minty green color, and we're just gonna get them painted up, get that on, get that dry before we start doing anything else. And you can see I really have to kind of wiggle this back and forth. Even if I had lots of paint on my brush, you can see how much it skips because of the texture on this. So I really have to kind of swirl it down in there. I just got a fleck in my eye. But you're gonna have to really swirl it down in there to kind of at least get a little bit more uniformity happening, because most of my washes are gonna want to skip over that lower detail as well. So we're just gonna get this on, get it dry, and then we can start the fun stuff. All right, next step, I'm going to start adding washes to this. And a wash is simply paint that you have diluted significantly. Oh, this is not gonna open. That you've diluted significantly with water. And I have some on the shelf, like this one, which is why it's hard to open, that are pre-mixed, meaning I have had many occasions to be able to create a very watery mixture of this. And this is dark bohemian blue. So I am going to kind of saturate my brush, and I am going to start letting this drip. And in order to be able to help it do that, I have a mister bottle. And I'm just gonna let it drip on both sides and start adding color this way. So I'm starting from the top, but I'm gonna want it to be dripping all the way down. And you can see we've got a little bit of that green showing. That's kind of our undercolor, but we're gonna be laying on all kinds of other colors kind of in this same way. We'll have some other techniques that we can use in order to be able to get a little bit more specific, if we want, about where the color goes. But we just want this nice kind of organic look. So I'm gonna keep laying down some of my blue on all sides, and then we need this to completely dry. You can see I've put down a garbage bag here to be able to deal with the mess. All right, in keeping with this, I've got some Carnival Red. I think it's Carnival Red I grabbed. Yes, Carnival Red mixed up with a ton of water. So it's very loose. And I'm just going to do the same thing with my red. And I'm going to paint it on strategically in a couple of spots. But obviously not so that it stays in place. And I'm going to let that drip also. So you get that I'm not painting this exact. I'm letting it be completely organic. But I am going to be layering some of the paint in ways that it kind of fits in perhaps a little bit with where it goes. Now, just so that you know, I am not forgetting the underbelly. I am tilting him over and kind of painting under there and then spritzing it as well, just so that it's not being missed, and letting it kind of drip down too. So the rock part, that base part, I'm not worried about right now. I'm letting everything else kind of drip and run and color it for now, and then I'll address it toward the end. But right now, we're just adding our red color in, and I'm not necessarily going to have to wait for that to, just seeing where I put that, to dry before I start in on my next little coat, because it's okay that it merges. So I'm just going to finish on the other side with the red, and then we'll be back with the next. Okay, if you follow me at all, then you know I'm a big advocate of use what you've got. I wanted to add some yellow to this. DIY paint, which is what I'm using, has got a really nice bright sunshine yellow, but I don't have one open. I don't want to open that whole color for little tiny projects because I'm not sure when I would get back to it. Just noticing I've got paint off my bag and on my table here. What I do have open though is the yellow, which is bright side, which is the pigment powder. So I'm going to use that instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a damp brush and I'm just going to dip it into my pigment powder, and I'm just going to add some of that yellow. You can see how bright that is. And I'm just going to put it again in a couple of spots. And this will also, let me move the rest of my powder out of the way. It will also activate with the water. So I would have used yellow paint. This is in essence yellow paint, but I just had to add it in a powdered form. I do have a light violet in that same, which is violaceous. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that in here too. So I've got a wet brush and I'm just adding it in spots. I don't know that I need tons of the violet. It's quite purple. But let's maybe get the front of his legs happening here. Something happening over there on his belly. And then we're going to do the same thing, kind of spritz it out, let it run and merge with everything. I'm loving this. I got to tell you, this is very freeing, very relaxing doing this. And we'll probably come back to these powders later as well when we go to do our finishing with this. But right now, I'm just getting some of the colors on and just keep layering them over top. So I've got this color and I've got a green and I've got a bit of a teal blue. And I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing with those colors as well, just starting to add them in. Okay, so we have tons of color on here, and more than it seems, because DIY paints dry lighter, and then when you go to seal them, then that darker, richer color comes out. What's left to do, this has got to dry fully before we go to seal it. And it feels very ice cold to the touch, which means it's wet. I want to add more color to the base here. So I want to go back to our little bit of bohemian blue and just add a bit more of it down in that bottom rock here, so that we've got a little bit more darkness happening here. And again, I'm going to use the spray bottle just to kind of spritz it so we don't have like a solid color somewhere where everything else is kind of multi-toned. But I want to get a little bit of that down into there. I do have a darker powder, which is a little bit more of like a weathered wood. It was my dried paint. So DIY paint, when it dries up in the can or the jar that you haven't had a chance to use it all, I take it out and I grind it up in a little magic bullet. And then I have my own pigment powders. So I am going to go grab that so I can add a little bit of that to the base. So here's my weathered wood. And you can see it's been ground down into a powder, just the same as those other powders that we were using. And I can use this the same way. I can apply some of that darker powder. I can spritz it in, and probably I'll pull it out again as we go to seal this to add some shadowing and shading as well, because I can use it as I can any of the powders with any of my wax. So I'm going to go, I'm going to grab some of my colors and I'm going to add touches here and there. Like here, this is just a little bit flat. I think I want to add a little bit of yellow, so I'm going to add a touch. So here I'm going to be a little bit more specific about what I'm using and where I'm using it. And but I'm still going to be spritzing. I still want it to be very loose looking and not painted on. So I still want that soft, kind of organic, kind of drippy look about it all. I missed recording this section, but what I am doing is I'm taking DIY's liquid patina in the gold, so the golden ticket, which is a very translucent gold, and I'm applying it strategically in some spots. You can see some at the top of the tail and the comb that I had done when I thought I was recording. And then I am also spritzing this with the water. It's water soluble, so I'm adding those spritzes of water to get it flowing down over the piece. I don't want any harsh areas of gold, and I want that softness and that sparkle in other areas. And this is our rooster having dried overnight. Now the next step, because there's still more steps, the next step is I want to get this paint sealed with wax. So I'm finished with the washes, and I've got some little dregs in here that I'll get after, but I just want to get enough wax on. I'm just using an old chip brush because this is still a very rough texture, and I'm not gonna go out of my way to ruin a good brush, and especially because I really have to kind of manipulate it down into all of those little crevices. So what I want to do is get the whole thing covered in clear wax. I'm using DIY wax, which is awesome wax, nice and soft, to be able to get into all of the different nooks and crannies. And then we'll be back because we want to start adding in definitely some dark wax at least. I'm going to add a little bit more gold after too, but I don't know. I haven't decided. I might make a dark wax too, like a blue wax from our Bohemian Blue, using that in the dark. It's a very real possibility. You can already see that there's a little bit of a change here, right? That we're getting a little bit more color here versus here, right? And I still have my powders out because I can use those in my wet wax. So I'm getting ahead of myself here. Wet wax the whole first. Do your clear wax. Get it all wet waxed first. And then right away we want to start doing some of our colored waxes while this wax is still wet. We're not leaving it to dry. I am going to want a little bit of that dark Bohemian Blue wax as I start into waxing these things. So to make a colored wax, and I don't need tons of it because it will go far, I'm just going to take some of my clear wax, and if I wanted it to be more pastel, I would use a white wax. And I'm just going to add, there we go, just a little bit of, oh, that's okay, it's just wax. A little bit of my Bohemian Blue to this. Doesn't take much. And now I have a very dark blue wax. You can do this with any color. So you can make your own colored waxes. You want turquoise, you want pink, you want purple. Just add that color of paint to your wax and you're good to go. So what I want to do now is I want to start adding, well, I want to go get my dark waxes. So let me line up all my colors and my waxes, and then we'll be back and I'll show you what we're going to do. All right, so I have my blue wax. I have my dark wax. Dark wax is brown wax, and I just like to put a little bit on the lid because I'm not looking to use lots. And if I dip directly into the big container, I tend to get more than I need. And I want to be very light. And I'm going to take this and start to work it into some of those details. Now, because I've got like a rough surface here, right? It's going to kind of separate in there a little bit, but I want to create some of those lines, and you can see that we've got a little bit of that happening versus any up here. So my dark wax, I'm going to be using like between some of those wings, just to create a little bit of shading, a little shadowing more than anything else, that just kind of highlights them a bit. But I've used a lot of clear wax on this so that I can soften it out. So I'm gonna be doing the dark wax in all those little kind of crevices like that. Okay? Where I think that I want to use my blue wax is, I'm going to grab another. I want little stubby brushes that are fairly stiff because of this uneven surface. So I want to take my blue wax and I want to add in just a little bit of colored edging here and there, right? So again, using it to kind of highlight, you can see that those ridges showing up versus these ones disappearing. So I'm going to use some of my blue wax in those places. So where I don't want, I can use it right up along maybe an upper edge. And I'm going to do all this before I break out my gold wax. There's always more. But I'm going to paint this in just to kind of give a little bit more highlight. And then if I want to, I can take these pigment powders again. I've got a dry brush. I'm gonna dip it into a little bit of my pigment powder. A little goes a long way. And what I can do is I can take this into my wet wax. And I can add, so in essence, I'm creating a colored wax right on the piece. And you can see those yellows that I've added in there. So I can do that with any of the pigment powders. I can now add a little bit more intensity of color in some areas that maybe I want, right? If it's too strong, take my clear wax brush and just kind of blend it in. But I get to use those pigment powders to create colored wax on the piece rather than pre-mixing it with the wet paint. So I'm just going to slowly add a little bit of that kind of shading and shadowing and a little bit of the coloring here and there just to add a little bit more pop where it needs it. And then we'll be back when it's gold wax time. You can see how little of the blue wax that I used relative to how much I made. It goes a long way. The last thing that I want to do is I just want to add a little bit of gold wax. So I have Golden Rule by DIY, which is a very translucent gold, unlike like a gilding wax or a rub and buff. And because we've already got gold on, I'm just looking at adding some light little highlights more than anything else. I don't want this harsh streak of gold. This will go across, like wherever I've got raised patterning, it will catch. And so I'm just adding some of that in, and I can make it stronger if I want, but I just really want it on some of those detailing, some of the edging to make them pop just a little bit more. And then this guy is done. And I gotta tell you, when I picked him up from the thrift store, I really wasn't too sure, but I'm loving him now. I did not like him when I bought him, but I love him now. So here's our finished rooster, and you can see him in all his glory. What's cool is that there's no section that is exactly the same because we did more of that paint wash technique, that the paint flowed in different ways in different directions. You got different looks because of it. Much more organic of a look. You certainly could have painted him all cream and just finished him in with a little bit of dark wax or some glazing to highlight some of the details. You could have gone super bold with opaque bright colors and painted him more rooster-like if you chose. A lot of different directions. He would look cool in just gold and black. What would you have done? First of all, would you have picked him up from the thrift store? And secondly, what way would you have gone? Love to hear your thoughts and comments. We all learn from each other in getting different perspectives on things. I'm digging him as he is. He's so me. Doesn't mean he's you. What would you have done? Let me know. I'm dying to know. Hope that you picked up some tips along the way on this one. Looking forward to seeing you on the next. And until then, take care.